Hello and welcome back to Cinema 105. We are continuing today our discussion of television. We're now in week 6 and hope you're enjoying the class. We're going to go back into the topic of television. I'm going to share some more of my observations. Again, I think you will find a lot of the material today relatable to you. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, television 2. Here we go. So once again, I'm just going to begin with the slides that we began television 1 with. We're considering the media environment. It's changed over time from just a single set in the home entertaining everyone to a completely all-encompassing surround sound theater to everybody also having their own devices. And we reviewed the differences between older television, maybe the way that your parents grew up. This is the way television was taken in, to the way that we take it in now. HD TV, sets in every room, viewable on multiple devices, color, stereo, 3D, and no commercials if you pay or pirate. So an entirely different television environment that's much more all-encompassing and is available at your whim, not the whims of a scheduler. So we said, again, summarizing, it's transformed from a group to an individual environment, from a communal to a private experience. It's transformed from being furniture to creating theater, from being public to being personal. So we say the medium is the message. As television has changed, so too has its effects on society. The medium is the message. Okay, we have 24/7 access. We have a plethora of choices that we never had before. How has that changed people's relationship to television? I would argue it's made them even more dependent. Their needs are serviced even further addicting them. So the medium is the message. Any understanding of social and cultural change is impossible without a knowledge of the way media work as environments. That's what we're talking about here, not just looking at the content. We'll do some of that, but also considering the environment it creates, the availability and the opportunities that are created by the medium of television, which we now have access to a huge catalog anytime. Okay, so here's this week's observations. TV conditions you to a corporate worldview. We're going to discuss TV in older generations and how TV journalism has changed. The coverage of the war is the war. TV audiences increasingly want to participate. They want to get involved with what they see on television. So first up, TV conditions you to a corporate world view. Certainly, capitalism and the corporate worldview is very prominent in America, making money, succeeding. Here's a quote from President Eisenhower. Making money is the #1 American value promoted on TV. Capitalism, not democracy, is foremost on the minds of the public. For example, most people have to work to pay rent and eat. Okay, that's 90% of the population's lot in life. But voter turnout hovers around just above 50%. People are constantly participating in capitalism, but only occasionally when the occasion arises, and if they feel like it, do they participate in democracy. TV is aspirational. Characters are always trying to succeed. TV inspires you to succeed, to do better, gives you tips on ways to succeed or make money. Here's examples of aspirational TV: American Idol, people who dream of being a great singer, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Joe Millionaire. This is where they take some relatively poor schlub and make him look like he's a millionaire and invite women to date him. See if that's going to help. America's Next Top Model. All these shows are aspirational, trying to be more than you are, trying to become famous, okay, and get on TV. TV makes you want to strive for more. Okay, Jim Cramer's Mad Money, teaching people how to earn in the stock market. So a lot of television is aspirational. People are succeeding. They're encouraging you to try harder, and they have all these wonderful things that are inspiring to us. Working hard. Television reinforces the American work ethic. Characters who work hard succeed. Lazy characters often fail, or they're played for comedy. Okay. Materialism, with all that work that you do and all that those jobs you aspire to, you're going to take that money and you're going to buy stuff. That's why television promotes it. Remember, TV exists to sell products. They don't make TV shows to keep society entertained. They create TV shows to feature commercials that sell products. And those advertisers pay for all the other stuff. They pay for television to exist. You come for the shows, but you get the commercials. And the commercials are encourage you to shop. As here we are, like a serious piece on CBS about the science of shopping. And shopping has become medicine. This is a byproduct of materialism. Some shows are strictly devoted to selling products on TV, and shopping and using shopping is now a common value amongst many folks in America. And we call this materialism. Television has been widely implicated in helping to usher in an age of consumer culture. In fact, the average American will spend 15% of their waking lives tuned into television and its abundant images of lavish homes, fancy cars, and conspicuous consumption. So generally, television characters live in great homes, ones that their jobs in the show could never afford. But that's the way we present television. We hire attractive people and we show people living good lives. It looks better on camera. So consumerism, that's a major value in American culture. It's a major value of corporate culture. And where did this idea start? Americans used to value saving and quality, but TV taught them to want to consume. And here we see examples of people writing books about the values of shopping, glorifying consumerism. So dominant cultural values change, okay? So in the 1930s, during the Depression, which we learned about a few lessons ago, frugality was what was admired. It was, how are you going to get by? How are you going to make the things that you have last or repair them? Okay. Less than 100 years later, extravagance, purchasing, showing out, living an exotic and exciting life with money is what we see on television. Advertising and PR changed the American citizen to the American consumer. If you don't think that this has had an effect, take a look at this. TV trust. Trust is the highest in TV advertising, and it's growing. Television is still where advertisers look to gain an audience. They have the highest belief by customers is here, as you see, in television. Way more than some of the other forms that we see shown in the graph. Do TV ads still matter? Absolutely yes. Okay, as you can see, the revenue spend on television is growing. It's gotten bigger and bigger every year. 5 hours and 4 minutes per day. People spend more time with TV than with any other major medium. 80% 80% reach of Americans 18 plus, whereas the internet only reaches 73%. 50% of adults say a TV ad prompted them to go online and find out more. So TV ads are still effective and they are still used, and millions are spent to create them. And in those ads, those corporate humans love their products. You ever notice that on television, that the people in the ads are super, super happy with the products they're buying? They're just excited to smell detergent. And this leads us to branding. We have a lot of status conscious consumers out there that buy specifically expensive brands. You probably recognize some of these names. And then also we have, consumers identifying with brands, buying $500 sneakers and maybe even never wearing them just to have that brand. Many brands through television have become associated with wealth. Now, are their products quality necessarily higher? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. But that branding name is what created that desire. People see it on television, they see it on celebrities, and they want it. So corporations, they conspire for your loyalty through television. They build brand loyalty through PR. 57% of shoppers spend more with the brands they feel a sense of loyalty to. Shoppers will tell family and friends about companies they're loyal to. That's 86%. Identifiable logos, which they splash everywhere, is how companies are constantly keeping you in keeping their company in your consciousness. I mean, why would they spend millions to have their logo, say, at a sporting arena? Well, because studies show that it was very effective. Also, we see in television something called product placement. Anytime you see a recognizable product in a TV show, money was paid for it to be there. This is a valuable secretive source of revenue. So from Stranger Things, many of you guys might remember this scene. The can of Coke, they had to rearrange that. I mean, it became the whole focus of this scene. And that was done deliberately. If you see two characters talking, why do they have to stop and talk in front of a Red Bull dispenser? This is all done deliberately, and it's a major source of revenue. As you can see, broadcast TV cashes in a lot on it. They try to do it subtly, but it's there to further advance advertising, because studies show this type of product placement can even be more effective than an overt commercial, which is shoving their message in your face. Food and TV. For many people, the preferred way to unwind after a long day is popping down on the couch and vegging out in front of TV. I'm guilty. We tend to eat more mindlessly in front of TV. TV and obesity. Research conducted at Harvard first linked TV watching to obesity more than 25 years ago. Since then, extensive research has confirmed the link between TV viewing and obesity in children and adults in countries around the world. We see the rise here in the chart. And finally, TV desires. TV encourages indulgence in your desires and wants, right? Aren't we seeing our fantasies played out on television? Seeing characters do things like commit crime and make love to people that we might dream about doing. So TV plays on our desires, all the better to sell to us. Okay. Question 1. How does TV try to turn its audience into good consumers through its shows and commercials? So this is sort of encompassing what we've just discussed in the lecture. I want to see that you've digested the lecture. Once again, how does TV try to turn its audience into good consumers through its shows and commercials? Write down the question now and continue, or you can stop and go and answer it. This is question 1. I'm going to move on now. TV news and older generation. So now we've talked about the generation gap, and now we're going to talk about how older generations are affected differently by television, okay? Because all media is experienced by generations in different ways, depending on when it was introduced to them, when they were much older or when they were just kids and it became a part of their life. Okay, first off, the silent generation. These are folks born from 1928 to 45. So, pre-war or during the war. They lived through a depression, a world war, civil rights upheaval, Vietnam, a president being assassinated, and eventually the complete transformation of American society as they age. I mean, the world has changed a lot. For some of these folks, TV reality tends to be more believed, but less understood. Then we have baby boomers, the group that's often discussed. These are the folks born after the war, 46 to 63, roughly. Around in the early 60s, the pill came in, remember. The pill to stop a pregnancy that a woman can take. So this began to slow down the production of children. So this is Americans' most devoted TV watchers, and they're the baby boomers. Boomers were children when TV was introduced. They literally grew up with the medium of television. And many trust it in a way that younger generations don't. Who are the boomers? They're the hippies, sometimes called the me generation. They're the largest U.S. generation in history. They still hold sway in property, leadership, and money. Note that they are not the primary target of marketing, which we've talked about before. That distinction goes to the young. Okay, so we see the numbers here on display. Older generations rely more on traditional TV. As you can see, younger generations are watching less, older generations watching more, younger generations turning to streaming, okay, adopting new technology before older generations. So, baby boomers, just some thought. Let's give these folks some sympathy. When the internet came of age in 2000, boomers were aged around 40 to 56. They were much older, already established in their careers. By the explosion of social media and streaming video in 2010, they were 50 to 66. So again, young people adapt to new technology media much faster. They grow up with the skills rather than have to learn them as adults. I mean, for those of you who've tried to learn a language when you were older, don't you realize how much easier it is if you learn it as you're growing up when your mind is a sponge? So television became a huge status symbol. Owning one was very important. In the 1960s and 70s, journalism did its job. Walter Cronkite declared Vietnam unwinnable. We saw a lot more investigative journalism about the Watergate break-in, the My Lai massacre in Vietnam, or actually in Laos. Pentagon Papers were released. Vietnam was declared a disaster. And then there was even considered to be a Kennedy assassination cover-up. So all of these tremendous events were exposed by investigative journalism at the time. The social climate of the 1960s can be viewed as a systematic rejection of the conformity of the 1950s, the immediate post-war period in America. A generation of young Americans born after World War II dismissed the mores of their parents. We don't want to go to fight in your war, as we see pictured here. Images from Vietnam shocked. We've covered a bit of this real quickly. Whenever a new media is introduced, it disrupts the dominant cultural values. It changes society. First, we shape our tools, then they shape us. So TV brings the battle into the home, and it changed Americans' thoughts on war. Here's another huge factor. TV broadcasts went full color in 1965, okay? Before they were in black and white, but now all of a sudden you were seeing explosions and soldiers in full color. Did it have an effect? Yes, it did. TV was a new medium and its power was unknown, but when it went color, we began to immediately see a change in Americans' opinions. So this light line is war in Vietnam was a mistake. From the introduction of color TV, we begin to see a steady increase in that opinion and an immediate decline in the idea that the people have a great deal of confidence in the military leaders. Television produced this change. Vietnam was the first television war. The Pentagon allowed U.S. journalists to roam free and capture whatever images they could for broadcast. This proved to be a mistake, at least for their image. So McLuhan says, television brought the brutality of war into the comfort of the living room. Vietnam was lost in the living rooms of America, not on the battlefields of Vietnam. Brilliant insight. And that's why we go back to McLuhan for his insights. So the teens of the 1960s grew up to oppose the war. When you grow up with the technology, it becomes a natural part of life. You've never known a world without it. The Vietnam War raged from roughly 1960 to 75. And some baby boomers became hippies. The youth of the 60s rebelled against the draft and going to Vietnam. This was a dramatic shift from just 25 years earlier when men volunteered for World War II. Think about this, 25 years of change. Well, what changed in that time? The children of the baby boom were unwilling to maintain the empire with their own blood. So over time, we start to see something called the me generation develop. Writers like Tom Wolfe comment on the rise of a culture of narcissism among younger people of that era. The phase caught on with the general public at the time when self-realization and self-fulfillment were becoming cultural aspirations to which young people ascribed higher importance than social responsibility. In response, the Army began to change its advertising. So now Army, be all you can be. So in other words, they're not appealing to your national identity or to your loyalty or your patriotism. They're offering the Army as something that can advance your agenda. Okay. So final comment here, Generation Me has grown up believing it's more important to do your own thing than conform to the group. So what changed? From the 1940s, when citizens volunteered for war service, to the 1960s, service to self, not to the war aims of the state. Well, lots of things. Television was invented and popularized. Remember, television emerges after the war in 47, and by the 60s, pretty universal adoption, as we discussed. Urbanization, people's moved to the cities, economic prosperity, you now were beginning to have a college educated population. GIs came back from war. They had the GI Bill. Some of them went to school. Some of their children went to school. It greatly educated the population. Plus, you had women as emerging as a major societal force. They were tired of the old patriarchal societal norms and worked to undermine them. The pill being introduced in 1960s, huge. It allowed women to have control of their reproductive choice. So what changed? Let's talk about television, okay, specifically. That's what the class is about. TVs became much cheaper. TV ownership grew through the 1960s to be nearly universal. TV went from black and white to color. TV became a nightly ritual, especially TV news. People would sit down and be on at the same time, pretty much immediately after work. TV promoted consumerism and individual pursuits. All of a sudden on television, you were seeing these exotic lives that people were living. You were seeing American homes and sitcoms that had televisions, and people wanted them. They wanted the products that they see on television. And they were inspired by the individualism, the people, the characters on TV in pursuit of their individual goals. So lots of more things. People move to the cities. The population becomes more educated, and more people moved into the middle class, which meant they had disposable income. They weren't just surviving. They were now had the luxury of sending kids to college. They had the luxury of having multiple cars and buying things like television, radios, and going to the movies. And here's the big one. We see a cultural shift from service, which we'd seen during the Depression, be frugal, pitch in, help out, through the war, knuckle under, be frugal, participate, be patriotic, to personal or exploration. The 60s and 70s became the me generation. Okay. Here's another thing that changed. The investigative journalism in the 1960s gave way to corporate news in the 80s and 90s. Okay, so in the US in the 50s and 60s marked the documentary's golden age, especially at CBS, where pioneering television journalists like Edward R. Murrow, immortalized in George Clooney's Good Night and Good Luck, that's a movie, produced such landmark investigation as CBS Reports program Hunger in America. So we had all of this great journalism through the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s, and slowly it began to change. Fox News began in 1996. It grew to become the dominant US cable news subscription network. And we see a lot more promotion of war, not critique. 20 and 30 years after Vietnam, we went to war in Iraq twice. This time, the Pentagon had learned their lesson. They completely managed the image of war released, controlling access, embedding reporters. Don't let them roam around. Send them off with troops specifically to specific locations. Aerial photography, they hired ex-generals to propagate the Pentagon perspective, and they hired PR firms to manage the public opinion and information war. That's right, PR firms were hired by the Pentagon and the Bush administration, the very biggest PR firms in the world, to sell the war, in essence, to the American people. So a lot of opinion was controlled. As I believe we've seen this slide before, but we had mostly pro-war opinions from the mainstream media, very little anti-war. The wars in Iraq were completely managed information wars. The Pentagon controlled the images, the messages, and the narrative. So they went into this with a clear plan. News channels began cheerleading for the war. They gave only controlled access to information, thereby controlling the stories that could be written. The Gulf and Iraqi war saw shock and awe, and they won the information war by controlling access to who could see what and what footage they could show. The public was dazzled by the incredible destructive force of the US military. The imagery was playing like a movie nightly on TV news. Controlling the image, again, the embedded reporter, the bird's eye view of aerial bombing. You don't see the destructive force that it might be having on citizens. You only see the dramatic sort of video game like perspective of aerial photography. Media hype led to a high approval rating to start the war, but then it began to decline as American bodies started coming back, as the war dragged on. as there was lots of strife, um, lots of civilian deaths, lots of soldier deaths, people began to lose faith in the war. And also, let's not forget the search for weapons of mass destruction. Okay, it's WMDs convinced the public that the war was necessary. But when no WMDs were ever found and it was exposed that the whole case was fabricated to sell the world, the US public, on the war, opinion really began to turn against the war. So public appetite in general for war in America has been on decline because of Vietnam and the failings there, and because of the Iraq wars and the failings there, the lies that went in. A lot of American citizens, particularly the more patriotic rural citizens who tend to donate more of their sons to the efforts of war, they began to be a little bit cynical. So the American appetite for war has declined over the last 20 years from 3 world wars in the Middle East. U.S. death counts are now monitored, and soldier caskets are returned without media fanfare. They don't want to call attention to it. This need to keep up morale is contributing to the increased use of drones and technology to reduce soldier deaths. Think about that. The soldier becomes very, very valuable when he contributes to changing the opinions of the American public about the war. His death becomes a negative imprint on support for the war. So, a volunteer army needs volunteers. And I just wanted to show just how the war advertising, or rather army and military advertising for soldiers, has changed. It used to be defend your country, enlist now, appealing to patriotism, okay? Now, we see different types of characters, different ethnicities, and we see an attempt to sell the army to the public. Here, the army empowers me to help others, appealing to people who have a good heart and are altruistic. Here, binge gamers, the army needs you. Phone zombies, the army needs you. I mean, that's most of the American youth. It's a significant portion of the American population. They're appealing to what they know or what they think that the young are into. And this is a fascinating example. They're essentially turning various jobs in the army into video game characters. You could be the dragon tamer, the thunder maker. You could even be the replenisher. That's a cook, I'm pretty sure. So army recruiting appeals to the interests, ego, and aspirations of the youth. They study youth culture and use their tendencies to attract recruits. Clever use of languaging is designed to attract young minds. So continuing on about war, I just want to make this statement too, talking about war and its coverage. TV coverage of the war is the war, okay? The war coverage is your entire experience of any war. Unless you go and participate and you're a soldier, that's different, or you've done that in the past. But for the rest of us that are home, we wouldn't even know a war was going on really unless it was on TV. TV news is there to broadcast the events of war. Know how much, I want you to notice, I kind of took this from, this is the 70s, this would have been the early 2000s, and now this would be currently now with the Ukrainian war. Note how much more sophisticated the images of modern war are. As the war machines get more lethal, so too must the media that records it. So we're seeing a progression in the documenting and sophistication of war and war journalism. Here's the thing, war is a ratings boom for television. People tune in, it's interesting, it's visually stunning, and it's dramatic, and it also riles up people's fears, especially if they think that war could spill over into their lives. War coverage makes for high ratings. War on TV has the best special effects we've ever seen, especially when they show us dramatic images like the one we see. Fear is known to increase ratings. No war coverage, no fear. How can you be afraid of something that you don't know is going on? Some of the media even turn to cheering for war. Here we have Greenwald complaining about the press being hungry for war and their coverage. The only way you have any information about a war thousands of miles away is through television broadcasts into your living room. Now, why would television journalism be excited for war? Well, it means a fantastic story and huge ratings. People tune in. Careers of journalists are made covering war. That's when they get their most accolades because of the dangerous nature of it. Experts appear and tell us what to think. We've covered this before, but a little more detail. These experts were handpicked by the Pentagon and coached on their performance. This was exposed in early 2002. They had this network of folks that will be brought in for training. They would be given daily speaking notes, and they would go out to the broadcasts on both conservative and liberal stations and espouse the ideas that the Pentagon wanted them to. This is what the Pentagon's learned from the Vietnam War. So, speaking of wars, have you ever heard of any of these wars? The Yemeni War, which is currently going on since 2014, and the war in Darfur. It's been going on since 2003. Both are considered humanitarian crises. These wars are being fought by Muslims in poor countries, not in Europe, and they're not being covered. But I bet you've heard of this war, the Mexican drug war from 2006 to the present. It's a media event. We have television shows about it. We have movies made about it. And of course, there's proximity and a cultural exchange between America and Canada, or excuse me, America and Mexico. Many Mexican Americans exist in this country, but it's also media coverage and hype, movies and TV shows. What we're seeing is the creation of heroes and villains. Now, the villain of the narco mafia boss has become a cliched and much used villain that we see in movies and television, and also the heroic CIA guy or cop that's going after him. The coverage of the war is the war. In a world dominated by easy video, everything important in life is filmed. To be important, something must be filmed. Television. As McLuhan says, all media exists to invest our lives with artificial perceptions and arbitrary values. John Lennon said, though, if everyone demanded peace instead of another television set, then there'd be peace. Okay, this brings us to question 2. What role has TV played in influencing the public's opinions of war? What role has television played in influencing the American public's opinion of war? Give me examples and explain. Please write down these questions now and answer in Canvas. I'm going to continue on. Okay, moving on to our final section today. TV audiences want to participate. I think this is the one you'll like the best and the most you'll relate to. TV audiences today want to participate. Okay, so in the 21st century, the audiences have gone from just wanting to watch to wanting to participate, wanting to get involved. The internet is interactive, video games interactive, but television traditionally has been a monologue. So TV participation. Regular people make for good TV, especially on game shows. Their reactions, they get excited. If they're awkward, they get nervous. Winning big is the goal, making money and getting more things. TV becoming more interactive, okay? So television and social media are deeply entwined. Social media is used by TV producers, influences an audience tune in, and therefore advertising revenue, okay? They advertise on social media and they also generate social media campaigns. TV audience members frequently interact with each other and about TV programs using social media. Audience members also give feedback to producers through social media, influencing the storyline. Here's an example. Jesse Pinkman from AMC's Breaking Bad, a very popular and hugely awarded show. He was supposed to be killed off in season 1, but they liked the character so much, the actor did such a good job, and audiences loved him. And they wrote in, the character stayed. He ended up staying longer because of positive fan reaction. And this is not the only example. So we talked about this before, but I'll bring it up one more time. Social media is social television is the future, as I see it. It's the union of television and social media. Okay, and it may even be inevitable. It seems like the two are coming closer and closer together, and maybe something like social media will be for the next generation the thing that draws them back into the television audience. It seems like it has the power to be very influential in the future. So social media is already starting to show up on broadcast. So of course we had a Twitter president, and we have commentators talking about people tweeting, but also on shows like Inside the NBA, they will actually share funny tweets from NBA players or just whoever making fun of the stars. Here we see a show about Wall Street and the stock market, tweeting what the stock market has said or what other investors are saying. So sharing tweets live brings the audience into the broadcast. It creates participation. Audiences want to participate. Okay, here's all kinds of examples of people creating shows, sometimes even humiliating themselves just because they want to get on the camera, getting arrested at a baseball game for running on the field. This guy, you probably don't know this example, but somehow he had gotten on stage at a Bob Dylan concert as a performer just to dance and be in the background. But in the middle of the show, he takes off his shirt and starts doing this wild dance and makes the whole performance about him. He gets 15 minutes of fame and notoriety as a performance artist. So TV participation. In Los Angeles, car chases are a TV bonanza. Audiences are gauged by the live action pursuit. And if you ever lived in Los Angeles, which I have, these are a regular weekly occurrence. And some people have even taken to tracking and chasing perpetrators. We remember the O.J. Simpson case, which was famous. That kind of kicked it all off. Here's an example. In 2015, a Good Samaritan in Utah, Rachel Fernandez, famously interjected herself into a live high-speed police chase. She attempted a complete maneuver, dangerous maneuver, to stop the suspect's vehicle. Her actions propelled the suspect's car into oncoming traffic, putting people in danger. And by the way, this is a daily occurrence. This happens all over Los Angeles. These are just some searches I did. Police chase yesterday, police chase today. TV participation. There's new cases of armed citizens stopping criminals in February. Armed citizens stop robbery suspect in Midtown Chick-fil-A. So studies routinely indicate that every year Americans use their firearms in defense of themselves or others between 500,000 and 2 million times. Okay, we see lots of these articles of people getting involved, especially in the states, of course, where open carry is allowed. TV focuses on petty crime. In fact, TV focuses on audiences. TV focuses audiences on petty crime, not corporate crime. Okay, investigative journalism is extremely expensive. The financial risk-reward ratio is not favorable to deep investigative journalism. So what we get is car chases, not paper chases. All right, here's a quote from a producer. The relative decline of investigative journalism in the United States is a function of really one factor: advertising revenue. White-collar crime is often complex and boring, with no car chases or shootouts. Interesting. So TV participation. Here's the Kenosha shooter, Kyle Rittenhouse, who saw protests on TV and went out to participate on August 25th, 2020. He shot several protesters in unprovoked attacks, but was later acquitted by a jury and judge. That same year, several months later, there was some unrest in Los Angeles. It was on all over the TV. Some minor riots throughout the city. Violence erupted, and the police were called in. Later that night, 2 sheriff's deputies were shot while sitting in their patrol car in an ambush-style attack in Compton. This was the same year, just a few weeks later in 2020. So TV participation. Many states have moved to allow open carry of firearms in public. Advocates state that in a dangerous world, it's their right to protect themselves by bringing armed weapons into normal public settings. Television retrieves the Old West shootout in the minds of viewers. Okay, so what do we see on television? We see characters with guns. I mean, a gun is almost a magical instrument on television. And once you pull it out in the scene, everybody in the scene freezes up. And now you control the scene. You get to tell people what to do. On television, a gun has a magical property. Television participation. Many of you might remember this event at the 2022 Oscars in April. Actor Will Smith slapped comedian Chris Rock on stage during the live telecast for a joke that was told about his wife. The incident became known as the slap and shocked the Hollywood community. Later that night, Smith received an Oscar for Best Actor at the show. Now, that's fascinating enough in itself, but then later that year, just in May of 2022, comedian Dave Chappelle was attacked on stage at the Hollywood Bowl. The man was subdued and was in possession of a knife. Now, no real explanation was ever given. He was shown to be kind of crazy, but comedians nationwide have seen an increase in audience heckling. That's a desire of audiences to want to participate. So we see fans committing crime to be on TV, to be on stage, to be in the spotlight. Today's audiences are raised on the internet and they want to participate. You've got Selena impersonators, dozens of them around the country. You got people tweeting and live streaming, playing video games. And of course, when we're talking about those video games, many of them are first-person shooter. You see from the perspective of the person shooting the gun. Audiences today want to participate. And sometimes that participation turns to cancellation, okay, where characters get canceled. The public has learned to exercise their power to cancel shows and stars. One example, TBS canceled CeeLo Green's The Good Life after there were tweets about sexual assault. Some fans spoke out. He got canceled on social media. Large corporations don't want any part of that. Once a character becomes stained by that, once someone's career has been tainted by something that the public is really against, they will often back away from that star. Regardless, if even these accusations have been taken into a lawsuit or legal proceedings. So I'm going to end with a really powerful story. This is the baby Jessica story. Okay, you may not know this, but just baby Jessica Morales became famous on October 14th, 1987, at the age of 18 months after she fell into a well in Midland, Texas. Rescuers worked around the clock for 58 consecutive hours to free her. The story gained worldwide attention, leading to some criticisms of a media circus, okay? Now, CNN was a fledgling cable news network, okay? It was just kind of coming out on the scene. And it was on the scene around the clock coverage of the rescue effort, dominating its broadcast for days. They were constantly giving updates. They had interviews with the parents, whatever. They were just filling their enormous broadcast time with coverage of this event. It remains one of the top rated news events in TV history. Now, a hero emerged, okay? A hero was created. Remember, media does that. And that hero was paramedic Rob O'Donnell. And he finally reached her on day 3 and crawling through a hole was able to pull the baby out of the hole. Even so, the coverage went on for weeks. But what happened to Rob O'Donnell? Well, 4 or 5 years later, battling post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of the arduous rescue effort and struggling to cope with the abrupt decline of the fame and recognition that had been lavished on him following his heroic act, Robert O'Donnell committed suicide in 1995, just 4 days after witnessing another major media television event, the Oklahoma City bombing. So this gentleman was a hero for about a half a year after this event. Coverage went on. He was interviewed. He did the talk show circuit. He, if it was Dancing with the Stars at the time, he would have done that. He was a hero. People were buying drinks. He was meeting quite a lot of women. He became a local hero, but over time, people thought he became a bore. He was drinking. He was expecting people to buy him drinks. He kept bringing up the issue. He kept talking about the baby Jessica story, what he had to do. Eventually, people moved on, and he didn't. But he wasn't the only one. The little girl's parents moved out of town to a 3-bedroom house they never could have afforded before she was rescued. So obviously, they got some money from media to tell their story. And believe me, the media did. They moved away to hide from the world that embraced them too hard. Eventually, the parents of the daughter of the little girl divorced. Others who helped to save the child found themselves drinking, in marriage counselings, or in legal tangles, all because of the fickle, seductive, burning spotlight. So, fascinating story. To wrap it up, we saw dominant culture values in this story. A Baby in Danger, it's a wholesome story about a family. Heroes to Celebrate, a race against the clock, a celebration of first responders. That's certainly a value we see. And it had a happy ending, but it also produced unintended consequences, misfortune, consumption by fame, an emotional roller coaster, which eventually led to addiction and narcissism. What lessons might we draw? The fickle nature of the spotlight, how media sensationalizes story for profit, and the desire for fame and the effects of it. So once again, McLuhan says, societies have always been shaped more by the nature of the media by which humans communicate than the content of the communication. The medium is the message. So as always, with television, be a conscious consumer. This brings us to our review. TV portrays a false corporate world of people happy with products. TV encourages aspiration, hard work, law-abiding, materialism, and consumerism. TV affects generations differently. Older and younger people respond to the effects of television differently, mostly because of the way that they grew up. TV promotes war for ratings and profits from it. TV audiences can react passionately to what they see on the screen, and it makes them want to participate. They want to run out and get involved in the protests in the street, or they want to be on their favorite shows in some way. TV is becoming more participatory by incorporating social media and audiences into broadcast somehow. So this brings us to the end of the topic, and here is our final question. Discuss the desire of TV audiences to participate and how that's changing TV. Once again, discuss the desires of TV audiences in America to participate with television and how that's changing television. Please give me examples and explain. Remember to write down the questions and take them over to Canvas and answer there. Hope you've enjoyed this coverage of this topic. I'm going to stop the share right now. We've examined the effects of TV, and as always, I want you to think about how this relates to you in your life. How you may not be a huge television watcher, but I bet many of you are streaming, you're on Zoom, and you're still having that relationship with the screen, still spending more screen time, most of us, than face-to-face time with humans. Okay, have a great week, and we'll see you guys next week.